They say some knocks change your life forever, but nothing prepared me for the one that came at exactly midnight. It wasn't frantic, yet it wasn't casual either. It was steady, deliberate, almost like the person on the other side knew I would answer. And maybe, deep down, I knew too. By the time I opened my front door, I'd already decided something was wrong. If you believe that sometimes fate sends us exactly the person we're meant to help, at the exact moment we're meant to help them, then like and subscribe, because this is one of those stories. I remember that night vividly. The air was heavy with the scent of rain from a storm that had passed earlier, and my little house on the edge of town felt even smaller under the soft yellow glow of the porch light. I'd been half asleep on the couch, a book face down beside me, the television murmuring in the background, when the knock came again. I swung the door open and froze. Standing there was a little girl, barefoot, hair tangled, wearing pajama pants with faded stars and a sweatshirt that looked at least 2 sizes too big. She was holding something tightly in both hands, but it was the look in her eyes that rooted me to the spot. They were wide, unblinking, and full of something I couldn't quite name. Fear, yes, but also determination. She swallowed hard, as if she'd rehearsed what she was about to say 100 times in her head. "Are you the man who used to live on Willow Lane?" Her voice was quiet but steady. I blinked, confused. I hadn't heard anyone mention Willow Lane in years. "I was a long time ago," I said slowly. "Why?" The girl looked down at what she was holding, a crumpled, creased photograph, and then back up at me. "My mom said, you could help us." And just like that, my world tilted. I didn't know her. I didn't know her mother. And yet, in that moment, there was no part of me that thought about closing the door. "Come inside," I said, glancing toward the street. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet for a barefoot child to be standing alone after midnight. She hesitated only a second before stepping into the warm light of my living room. The photograph trembled in her grip. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Lila," she said, her voice softer now. "Lila Grace." She glanced at the clock on the wall and bit her lip. "We don't have much time." I crouched so we were eye level. "Time for what?" Her small fingers tightened around the photo. "My mom's sick. She won't wake up right." I tried shaking her. I tried calling her name. "She told me, if it ever got bad, to find you. She said, you'd remember." 1,000 questions tangled in my mind, but I could see the urgency in her face, the way her little chest rose and fell too fast. This wasn't the moment for answers. "Where do you live, Lila?" 3 streets over." I came a long way so he wouldn't see me. I almost asked who he was, but the tremor in her voice made me save it for later. Instead, I grabbed my coat, locked the door, and told her to lead the way. The night air was damp and cool, the streets slick from the rain. We walked quickly, her small bare feet slapping softly against the wet pavement. She didn't complain once. Every so often, she'd glance over her shoulder, scanning the shadows like she was expecting something, or someone, to follow. "How do you know me?" I asked as we crossed a dimly lit intersection. "Mama told me," she said without looking at me. "A long time ago, you did something for her. She never told me what, but she said you were the only one she could trust if," her voice faltered, then firmed up, "if tonight ever happened." That tightened something in my chest. I searched my memory for a face, a name, anything that would connect me to a woman I didn't remember meeting. But the only thing I found was a vague ache, like an old photograph you can't quite bring into focus. We reached a rundown apartment complex at the far end of town. A single light flickered above the entrance, casting long shadows across cracked concrete steps. Lila pushed open the heavy metal door, the smell of mildew rushing out to meet us. The hallway was narrow, lined with peeling paint and doors that all looked the same. She led me up 2 flights of stairs, her small frame moving with surprising speed, until we stopped outside a unit with a faded 3C nailed crooked above the door. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the knob. "She's in there," Lila whispered. "But she's not like she was before. She's tired, really tired." Her voice cracked for the first time. I put a hand on her shoulder. "We're going to help her. I promise." The door creaked as we stepped inside. The place was dim, lit only by the blue glow of a television in the corner. The living room was small but tidy, except for the blanket and pillow on the couch that looked like someone had tried to make a bed there. "Mama." Lila's voice was barely a breath now. No answer. She motioned toward a narrow hallway. and I followed her to a bedroom at the end. That's when I saw her, a woman maybe in her early 30s, lying curled on her side, pale and still. Even in the dim light, I could see the sweat on her forehead. "Mom," Lila whispered, moving to her side, shaking her gently. The woman stirred, opening her eyes just enough to see me. And then, I swear I saw recognition there. "You came?" she murmured before her eyes slid shut again. I pulled out my phone and called for an ambulance, giving the address in a voice that sounded far steadier than I felt. As I ended the call, Lila looked at me, tears finally brimming in her eyes. "You're going to help her, right? You promised." I nodded, feeling the weight of that promise settle deep in my chest. "I will, Lila. Whatever it takes." And though I still didn't know why her mother had trusted me above anyone else, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was no coincidence. The wail of the approaching siren cut through the stillness of that cramped apartment, growing louder until red and blue lights spilled through the thin curtains like some strange, fractured dawn. Lila stood beside her mother's bed, holding her hand tightly, her knuckles white against her pale skin. I stayed near the doorway, keeping my voice low when the paramedics arrived, explaining what I knew, which wasn't much, and answering their quick, clipped questions. They moved with practiced urgency, checking her vitals, securing an oxygen mask, prepping a stretcher. Through it all, Lila never let go of her mother's hand until they gently pried her small fingers away to load the woman onto the gurney. "You can ride with her," one of the paramedics told Lila, but she looked to me first, eyes wide, silently asking if I'd stay with her. "I'm right behind you," I promised. And I meant it. I didn't know this family, didn't understand why my name had been whispered like a lifeline in the dark, but something about the way Lila clung to my words made it impossible to walk away. At the hospital, fluorescent lights and the sterile tang of disinfectant replaced the musty air of the apartment. Lila and I were shown to a small family waiting room with vinyl chairs and a vending machine humming in the corner. She sat quietly for a few minutes, staring at the floor, then glanced at me as if she'd been turning something over in her mind. "She told me about you," she said. "Not your name. Just that once, when she had no one, you helped her. She said you gave her something that changed everything." I tried to remember, faces blurred by time. The fleeting encounters you don't think will ever matter again. But the truth is, I couldn't. "Do you know what it was I gave her?" I asked. Lila shook her head. She just said, "He'll remember when it matters." Her voice cracked at the last word, and I could see the fight in her trying not to cry. I told her it was okay to let the tears come, but she just shook her head harder, like she was trying to be the strong one for both of them. A nurse came in to update us. Her mother was stable, but needed fluids, medication, and rest. They were running more tests. Lila nodded like she understood, though I could tell the medical jargon was washing over her. I asked if we could see her, but visiting hours were strict for patients undergoing certain procedures. That left us in the waiting room, alone again, the hum of the vending machine filling the silence between us. To distract her, I asked about school, her friends, her favorite things to do. Slowly, little pieces of her life emerged. She liked to draw, she hated math, she had one best friend named Zoe who lived 2 buildings over. Her mom worked late cleaning offices, sometimes 2 shifts in a row, and Lila stayed with Zoe's family until she came home. "She doesn't sleep much," Lila said quietly. "She says she's fine, but sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking, she just sits at the kitchen table and stares at nothing." I could hear the worry in her voice, the kind of worry no child should carry. "What about your dad?" I asked gently. Her shoulders tightened. "It's just us," she said, and nothing more. Hours passed. Every so often, a nurse would poke her head in to tell us there was no change yet. Lila fought sleep, her head bobbing every few minutes until finally, she leaned sideways and dozed off against my arm. Sitting there, I felt the weight of it, the strange thread that had somehow connected my life to hers, the responsibility I hadn't asked for but suddenly couldn't imagine refusing. When the nurse finally returned to say her mother was awake and asking for us, Lila's eyes snapped open like she'd never been asleep. We followed the nurse down a long corridor, the rhythmic beep of monitors and the soft shuffle of shoes against polished floors surrounding us. Her mother lay propped up in bed, color slowly returning to her cheeks, eyes glassy but alert. When she saw me, something in her expression shifted, relief, recognition, maybe even gratitude. "It's you," she said softly, her voice raw. "I wasn't sure you'd even remember me." I stepped closer. "I'm sorry. I want to, but I don't." She smiled faintly, like she'd expected that. It was years ago. I was 19, scared, broke, and sitting in a bus station trying to figure out how to get out of town. You sat next to me. We didn't talk much. But when you left, you put an envelope on the seat. Enough for a bus ticket to get me away from him. Enough to start over. The memory struck like lightning, sudden, bright, undeniable. I remembered that night now, the look on the young woman's face, the way she cradled her stomach as if shielding someone inside. "I never thought I'd see you again," I admitted. "Neither did I," she said. "But when I got sick, I told Lila, if it ever got bad, find you. Because you were the only person I ever met who helped without asking for anything in return." I looked at Lila, standing beside the bed, her small hand wrapped in her mother's. The room felt heavy with the weight of unspoken things. Years of survival, of scraping by, of never asking for help unless it was the last possible option. "You saved us once," the woman said. "And now here we are." I told her she wasn't alone anymore, that I'd make sure she got the help she needed this time too. She tried to protest, to insist I'd done enough, but I could see in her eyes the same exhaustion I'd seen back in that bus station all those years ago. Lila looked between us, sensing something important had just passed, even if she didn't fully understand it. "So, you knew each other before I was even born?" she asked. Her mother nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, baby. Before you, there was just me. And he gave me the chance to make a life so you could be in it." Lila looked at me with a seriousness far beyond her years. "Then I guess I owe you too." I shook my head. "You don't owe me anything. But if you want, we can make sure this time no one has to run anywhere ever again." She smiled for the first time that night. A small, tired smile, but a real one. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about repaying an old debt. It was about building something new, something worth staying for. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the hospital room in soft golden streaks, warming the pale walls and casting gentle light over the sleeping figure in the bed. Lila sat cross-legged in the chair beside her mother, her small hand resting protectively over the older woman's. I had spent most of the night in the waiting room, my back stiff from the vinyl chair, but my mind restless with plans. I'd already spoken with the attending physician, who explained that the illness was chronic but manageable, if she could get her medication consistently and keep up with checkups. Without them, the relapses would get worse. The problem, of course, was the cost and the gaps in insurance coverage. But this time, unlike all the years she'd been fighting alone, she wasn't going to have to figure it out by herself. Around mid-morning, I left briefly to make phone calls to a friend at the community health center, another at a nonprofit that specialized in emergency prescription funding, and a former coworker who now managed a local housing assistance program. Every call felt like another piece falling into place, and by noon, I had something I'd never had before when it came to helping someone, a concrete plan. When I returned to the room, Lila's face lit up like the sun itself. "Mama's been awake. We were talking about my drawings." Her mother looked at me, her eyes a mix of fatigue and something warmer, hope. "You've already done too much," she began, but I cut her off gently. "No, not enough. Not yet." I sat beside her bed and told her everything. The expedited application for patient assistance, the temporary pharmacy vouchers that would cover her next 3 months of medication, the appointment I'd booked for her with a social worker who could help with ongoing support. Her hand trembled as she covered her mouth, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." I shook my head. "You don't have to. You thanked me the first time, years ago, without even knowing it, by getting on that bus, by building a life for Lila." That was when Lila slipped off her chair and came to stand in front of me, looking very serious for someone so small. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. I nodded. She took a deep breath, like the words she was about to say were heavier than she was. "Last night, when I knocked on your door, I was scared. But Mama always says that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are. And when you opened the door, I knew I'd found the right person. Mama told me you were the reason we were here at all. I didn't believe her, because I thought, who helps someone for no reason? But now I know you really did. Twice." Her voice wavered, but she didn't cry. "So I just wanted to say thank you for saving my family." And can you be part of it now? Like for real. The words hit harder than I could have prepared for. My throat tightened, and I had to look away for a second, pretending to adjust the chair, because in all my years, I'd never been asked something that cut so deep in so few words. Lila, I began, my voice rough. I'd be honored. Her mother reached out, placing her hand over mine, her grip surprisingly strong for someone still recovering. You've already been part of it, she said softly. We just hadn't said it out loud yet. That was the moment the tears finally came, not hers, but mine, hot and uninvited, because the truth was, I hadn't realized how much I'd needed to hear those words until they were spoken. For years, I'd moved through my life doing what I thought was enough. Working, keeping to myself, trying not to think about the connections I'd lost along the way. And here was this little girl, standing in front of me like a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. By the time the discharge papers were signed 2 days later, everything was in motion. The prescriptions covered, the follow-up appointment set, the housing assistance paperwork halfway processed. I drove them home in the late afternoon, the sun dipping low enough to cast the streets in long shadows. When we reached their building, Lila hopped out, then froze. It's so clean. She wasn't wrong. I'd made one last call, this one to a few volunteers I knew from the community center. And while we were at the hospital, they'd cleaned the apartment from top to bottom, stocked the fridge, and left fresh flowers on the kitchen table. Figured you could use a proper welcome home, I said, watching her eyes dart from the new dish towels to the fresh blankets folded neatly on the couch. It's like magic, she whispered. Her mother was quiet as we carried the bags upstairs, and when we set them down, she turned to me with that same look from the bus station years ago. The look of someone standing right on the fragile edge between despair and possibility. We're going to be okay now, aren't we? She asked. I looked at her, then at Lila, who was already arranging the flowers into a vase too big for her little hands. Yeah, I said. We are. And I meant it. That night, as I left their apartment, Lila ran after me into the hallway, barefoot again, and pressed something into my hand. It was the crumpled photograph she'd been holding the night we met. A picture of her mother, young and smiling, standing at a bus station with one hand on her belly. I recognized the background instantly. Mama said you should keep it, she told me. Because without you, I wouldn't be in it. I looked down at the worn edges, the faint creases, the proof of a moment I'd almost forgotten but had never really let go of. Thank you, Lila, I said, my voice thick. This means more than you know. She grinned, that gap-toothed kind of smile that makes you believe the world still has good in it, then darted back inside before I could say anything else. And as I walked to my car, I realized something simple but undeniable. Sometimes the smallest knock can open a door you didn't even know your heart had been keeping closed. And sometimes, letting someone in is the thing that saves you right back.